Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar today. This is the first of a series actually called Splunk Bite-Size Security that we're doing here at Somerford Associates. And today we're going to be talking about case management under the hood with Splunk Enterprise Security. Plan for today, this morning. First of all, just going to look at some of the CIS controls, the critical security controls there, and case management in Splunk Enterprise Security, and where Enterprise Security as a SIEM will help you meet those. We'll take a quick look at that. We will look at the notable event framework. That is the alerting framework really within Enterprise Security. Investigations in Enterprise Security. So how can we, upon detection of an alert or the receipt of an alert, how do we follow that through and investigate it to closure? And there are some tools there that we're given in Enterprise Security to let us do that. The adaptive response framework as well. So there's a degree of when an alert is triggered. This allows us to perform some follow-on actions. We'll have a quick look at Splunk SOAR as well, which is quite interesting. It follows on quite nicely from some of the previous topics we've looked at. Okay, so looking at some of the CIS controls, there are three we want to look at really. So the first one, Control 8, audit log management. So I guess kind of obvious this one really. So we're looking to collect, alert, review, and retain audit logs of events that could help detect, understand, or recover from an attack. So the first part of that, collect, alert, and review, that's Splunk bread and butter stuff, but certainly to detect, understand, and recover. Certainly part of that is going to be assisted by having a SIEM such as Enterprise Security. The next one here, Control 13, so network monitoring and defense. We know what that is, but the control itself, 13.1, a centralized security event alerting. So this is really talking specifically about a SIEM. So not much to say about this one really. The function of a SIEM aligns very well to this particular control. And 17 as well, perhaps similar to the first one we talked about, incident response management. So establishing a program to develop and maintain an incident response capability to prepare, detect, and quickly respond to an attack. So again, for this control, the function of Enterprise Security works in, it assists in this particular control quite well, certainly in the prepare, detect, and respond to an attack. Having that, event management part of a SIEM will align very well to the last part of that sentence there. Okay, so that was a quick look at that. Just really for some context as much as anything else. It's the why we're doing it and how does it fit into that sort of governance picture, but into the nuts and bolts, I suppose. So the notable event framework here. So as I alluded to earlier, this is the security, this is the detection framework. So searches are going to be running, and upon triggering a set of events, they'll create a notable event, which we'll take a look at soon. But yeah, whereas things like data models and data model acceleration are the gears within Splunk Enterprise Security, the engine, if you will, notable events, correlation searches will be using that work being conducted under the hood of Enterprise Security, and they'll be generating alerts through correlation searches. So the framework, bit of a diagram of it here. So on the top, we've got a security admin creating a correlation search. So that is a correlation search that will generate a notable event. If that search triggers, the notable event is generated. It's persisted, so it's actually a piece of data or an event that's indexed. There's a notable event index. And incident review as well. Some information is also provided within the KV store as a collection. The notable events then themselves, you can view them on the incident review dashboard, which we'll look at shortly. Analysts can change the review status of a notable event, so things like new and open, things like that. And all that information it's displayed within Enterprise Security. So let's take a look at that now. So here we are in our environment. We've just logged into Splunk, and on the left we can see Enterprise Security. So let's just click that now. And let's just run a search and generate the kind of information for an alert we might want. And then what I want to do is we'll go to our configure. We'll partially create a correlation search, and I'll show you how a notable event can be generated from that. But it might be the case Well, in this environment, I'll just add everything's been sent to main. Of course, in a production environment, we'll be doing that. But this is for demonstrative purposes. So we've got our firewall data coming into main here. It may be that we want to alert on, I don't know, source IP addresses that are being blocked. Let's have a look at that. So yeah, more sensible search might be just in the last 5 minutes, of course. We can see some here. Let's also narrow it down a little bit further where count could be greater than 50 perhaps. Or maybe lower even more. Okay, so we've got some data that's been generated here. So maybe, you know, it's a fairly contrived example, but this could be the kind of search that we want to generate for, you know, some security context. And if this was to happen, maybe we want to have an alert for it. So I mean, if we have that, we can go to our content and content management part, and this is where we can begin to create a correlation search. Create new content, correlation search here. We would give it a name, you know, firewall alert, for example. The actual search would go into here, give it a description. We've got some annotations. So this is the kind of information, if this does get triggered, if there's a specific part of the kill chain that we might want to enter that here. MITRE attack tactics and techniques, we can annotate that here. And if it does trigger, that additional context is provided to the analyst. Time range, how often we want it to run, all that kind of thing. So this is all pretty general stuff. This is all part of the correlation search. Now, a notable event is an adaptive response action, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Here we go, notable. We can click notable. And now what happens, if this generates, actually triggers, this alert actually triggers this correlation search, it will then create a notable event. And in a similar fashion, we can fill this in. So, you know, we can call it firewall event, give it a description. We're looking at which domain would it be? I suppose network here, severity, probably low. It really depends on your environment on that one. Drill down name. So if it does trigger, we'll have from the instant review screen an option to click, and we can actually look at the raw events, for example. We could just, you know, provide the search here for that. Identity and asset extraction, I'll leave that for Ben in a later video, but there is some interesting stuff there about how Splunk can add some context around these things under the hood, and some alert action stuff here. And next steps, interestingly as well. So if we want to upon triggering of it, maybe we want to give some guidance and direction to our analysts and say, well, this is what I want you to do next. But we would save that, enable it, and if it was to trigger, what we would see is a notable event being generated, which is really it's data being saved to the notable index. So let's just take a look at that now. Index equals notable. Please ignore the error there. It's a demo environment we've spun up here, but here we can see notable events. So here we go. We've got a threat correlation search that's triggered, and we have all the various pieces of information that's been written to index here about that alert, allowing it to persist. So if we do return to enterprise security, then if we look at like our incident review, for example, now a lot of the events that you're about to see under here, this is all coming from the index equals notable. So the notable index that we saw. We can see all that stuff here. Certainly security posture as well, giving you that high level view, which we'll see shortly when it loads. all of this kind of information that's displaying here, it's most of it anyway is being read from that index equals notable, the notable event index. So yeah, so that's how all that works. If we just go back to our incident review. So yeah, to summarize there, we have something we want to alert on. We have a use case that's perhaps come down from strategic direction from the CISO. We would then implement that use case as a search, test it, create a correlation search, create that notable event action upon it being triggered. And if it does, it's then getting written to the notable index, and it has all that extra contextual pieces of information, and then that is how we can review and monitor our notable events. So that's how that works. As it's bite size, it's probably time we best move on to the next bit. So how do we actually investigate these incidents in enterprise security? So on this slide here, we've got, it's a pretty standard enterprise security workflow, what we might typically expect to see. Obviously this could change, but by way of example, it's pretty useful. So starting on the left here, we've got review events. Okay, so a notable event has been triggered. We can see it in our incident review. That's opening up, and it's that initial triage piece really. It might not necessarily be enterprise security though. It could be a phone call. It could be an email from a particular department. It could be a service ticket being opened. But generally the context here is going to be enterprise security and initially triaging it. Okay, after that point, we've discovered this is an incident. We're going to then start an investigation. We're going to do some assessment as to, we're going to do some diving into this incident. And in doing so, we're going to be determining risk. We're going to be using the Splunk investigation workbench, artifacts, and we're going to be documenting the process there. We'll be looking at that shortly. Mitigation. This is going to be where we're going to be collaborating with other teams, NetOps, IT Ops generally, try and close that incident down after it's been remediated. And the final part, reassess. So as we saw previously, a notable event, it's written to an index, so it's immutable. It's going to be there. It's going to allow us in the future to return to it, assess what happened, training, research, that kind of thing. So typical workflow there. Let's go back to our enterprise security page here. So this is the incident review. Alerts are coming in. What we initially might first want to do is open it up. We've got a lot of extra contextual information here. We've got IP addresses, so anything really useful, or we can decide what is useful. But these additional fields, key fields, really, so categories, destinations, kill chain phase. It's not been filled in there for this particular example. Threat activity, all this other stuff. Sometimes as well, we can configure it to show the original event, of course. And we've got a lot more information here in this one. So that's all great. We've got some risk scores here, which again, that's another video that Ben will be talking you through. We've got some potential actions that we can conduct all from here. So this initial page is when a notable event has been generated. You're alerted to it. We will take a look at it initially from here. So it's one of the, it's that sort of first triage step really. We can search from across the top. There are various things we can search on: security domain, owner, for example. We can select one. Oops, excuse me. We can edit the selected. So we might want to change its status. Is it under investigation? Maybe we've closed it. Perhaps we just know it's a false positive straight away. We can assign it to someone as well. So as it comes in, perhaps there is a specific user we want to assign that to. Disposition. This is quite useful because there's a dashboard on false positives, true positives, all that kind of thing. It provides statistics on that, and that's useful. That's actually useful for tuning our alerts should that be required. But let's say we are interested in this particular threat with multiple infections. What would we want to do there? Maybe we do want to sort of dive into that. So we're going to add it to an investigation. sure what happened there, apologies. Okay, so we're going to add this selected one to an investigation. Now we don't actually already have an investigation here, so let's create one. Give it a title, my affected host investigation. We'll call it new. Let's start it, shall we? So it's going to move us to the workbench. And here, this is yeah, like the title would suggest. Really, there's not much more to say on it. It's our workbench. So on the left, we can see an artifact. The artifact being an IP address. Think of an artifact as if you've got a key value pair in a log. That's really what it is. If it's got a security context, so it's, you know, it's an IP address. It could be a file hash. It could be a user. Here we can see, you know, this is an asset. This IP address. Maybe we want to add an artifact. We can do that here. We can say, you know, we know we've got an identity. You know, we can Stuart. You know, we can add that to there, and that'll appear here. There are various actions as well we can conduct from it. We can also add notes under here if we want to do that. Yeah, and basically what we're doing here, we can record our investigation within this panel. It's quite a large piece, so it's probably not one to dive into in a sort of bite-sized workshop, but yeah, there's a lot more we could talk about here. I mean, for example, timeline as well. So as actions are conducted, we can see that, we can follow that process along here. Summary sort of statistics. Yeah, we can edit them. We can actually run a search from here as well, in fact. So if you wanted to run a search based on that IP address, we could do that. You know, index equals, in a production environment, maybe something like netfw. We could search, you know, where else have we seen that? Where else have we seen that particular? Where else have we seen that particular artifact? Okay, so yeah, this is really what it looks like. If we go like this, we can also get some additional sort of context around there. But yeah, okay, that's how these investigations will work, and that's how we can sort of follow it through. We can also collaborate as well. So if, for example, we were to run a different search here, we can go index equals main, source IP equals something. Let's just stop that. So, you know, we've run this search. Perhaps we've put in the IP address of the artifact previously. You know, what we can do now as an event action, we can add this to an investigation. For example, this particular event. Yeah, here we go. Save it there. If we go back to it, we've now got some additional events and stuff tied to here. Okay, so that is Investigation Enterprise Security. It provides that workbench for us to be able to do that. So next, Adaptive Response Framework. So you might have already seen a little bit of this as we were sort of working through some of those previous examples. But really what we're doing here, we will have an add-on, and that's going to create an adaptive response action, and it will integrate with an external system or service, as it says here. So really what we're doing is we add an add-on. Within that add-on, there's going to be some scripts that is going to allow us to interact with the API of a service. ServiceNow, for example, if we have that particular TA installed, we can trigger the creation of a ticket or the closure of a ticket even, potentially. We could do that via alert actions on here. So we would have a search or a correlation search here, similar to before. It gets triggered. and then an alert action can be generated from that. Response actions can also be indexed, but also as well ad hoc invocation. So you can trigger these things from the incident review panel, which we'll take a look at. We'll take a look at that now, in fact. So if we go back to Enterprise Security, we go to our incident review page. Here there is here one I found. Here's one I created earlier, type thing. Once that loads, we have an event where there are some alert actions already ready. So here we go, abnormally high number of HTTP GET requests by a particular IP address. So let's open that one up. Here we can also see as well, it's worth mentioning it's unassigned, network domain, low urgency though. But what we can see here in the next steps, where we talked about before, we might be able to give some guidance to an analyst where to go next. We've actually got our alert actions here. So it might be we want to do some packet capture. We can trigger that run from there. We'll just give it the various details, and that'll work for us. Maybe we want to do some risk analysis, or surprise, surprise, as I mentioned it earlier, we've got ServiceNow open a ticket. So that's something else we can automate that from here, which is pretty cool actually, I would say. And it's underused. It is one of these features that is out there. It's completely possible, and it's definitely worth configuring. And also, if we go back to our, I mean, that's one example. When we create a correlation search, we saw it earlier. Create new content, correlation search. Once you've got the TA installed, for example, the ServiceNow TA or Splunk Stream, which is the packet capture technology that we have ready for Splunk, it just lets you use it here. So I mean, there's so many options. Domino's, order a pizza. Okay, that's a fun one, but send email, etc. You can do all these things. So if an alert triggers, if it's a particular nasty one, you're going to be up all night, get the pizzas in. Okay, definitely a whistle-stop tour of the adaptive response framework then. But I mean, if we were to boil it down, it's a set of scripts that's going to interact with an API when you want it to. I guess it's the beginning of the SOAR piece, which is probably why it's quite a nice place to sort of jump on from there. So yeah, enter Splunk SOAR. What we're looking at before, the beginnings, some kind of automation of responses which we can do. Now, of course, with Splunk SOAR, now this will be a whistle stop. It's the topic of a different set of workshops altogether. It is a broad topic, but this is what we can see. We've logged into Splunk SOAR here. This is the sources dashboard, and what we can find is we've got events being forwarded to Splunk from to Splunk SOAR from Splunk. So if we just open one of these up, we've got a short-lived account. It's probably one of the out-of-bottle alerts you've heard of before, but yeah, we've got a short-lived account detected called user A. That's been sent to Splunk SOAR for further analysis. And this is what you look like. So it's kind of similar to that investigations workbench that you saw in Enterprise Security, but as you can imagine, with being SOAR, the automation and the orchestration aspects of this is far more powerful, and it certainly requires a more mature posture to be able to use this, I would say. But from here, we've got an artifact. If there's anything of use in here, we might be able to. I mean, if there was an IP address in here, for example. Or a user, actually, no, here we go. So we could click on user. We can run actions directly from here, look up user, contain users like that, depending on what we've got configured on Splunk SOAR. So in a similar way to alert actions, in Splunk SOAR, we set up apps, which are integrations to various pieces of security type hardware you might have, or cloud services, and they will interact with that and perform actions on your behalf programmatically. Playbooks are a massive aspect of this. That is definitely a whole different topic, but we can run them from here, for example. So a short-lived account detected, we can manually run a playbook here. We can pick one. and we can get it to run. In this similar way, we've got timelines, we can add evidence. So it's a whole other case management piece, but with a lot more focus on the orchestration and automation. As you can imagine, right? It's Splunk SOAR. It's a SOAR technology, and it's further down the line. Really useful for security teams that know where they can make their savings in terms of time. They know the repetitive tasks that their analysts are doing. Maybe you can automate those tasks. Why are we checking the reputation of URLs all the time? Let's just write a program to do that. Let's get Splunk SOAR to do that, and then let's get our analysts doing some real threat hunting. Okay, so that's coming to the end of that bite-sized webinar. Thank you for attending. Whistle-stop tour from a few features there of case management within Splunk, but I hope it's been useful. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact us at info@somerfordassociates.com. And that's great. Yeah, thanks very much for attending, and see you at the next webinars.